Hello and welcome to episode 62 of Nugget's Dungeon Terrain. This is the second last piece of the Thieves Maze project. This room will be fully decked out with fire traps. I'm going to call it the incineration room. The floor in this room will be themed a little bit differently to the rest of the dungeon. It's made up of metal with two pipes running across it. I want the floor of this room to look as uninviting as possible. Hopefully players will be so scared of the floor and its traps that they'll look at the higher ground where a couple of raised platforms will sit. The trick is, in this room, the less time in here you spend, the better. You don't want to spend time climbing around, you want to jump and run through. Because the floor is going to be metal and not stone, I'm not overdoing this texturing. Instead it will just look like some key rust points and weathering spots. After first painting the whole floor section black, I've generously coated it in a very dark metallic grey. This was then followed by a liberal application of a watered down ink. Then I used some patina paints from a brand similar to this and applied them in 3 stages. You'll notice I'm mostly hitting the edges and the areas that I textured using the alfoil. The brush I'm using for this patina job is one that I would normally have thrown out. The bristles are spread and hardened by glue. Generally the bristles are very crusty, but this allows for a really open and random application of the paint. This old tin bits paint pot dried out a long time ago, but I love adding water to it and picking out some of the little gritty bits, and here I'm using it to line each of the fire trap spouts. This is to make it look like it has some kind of tar resin left behind, as well as the general burning that would happen every time the incinerator activates. A smaller brush this time, but this is also one that would normally have been thrown out. It's really great for stippling on instead of applying an even spread. And now let's take a look at the walls and how that relates to the overall setup. The entry and exit points to this room will be a single space wide, and they won't line up with each other. The aim of this is to try and give the impression that you cannot just make your way through the room quickly, jumping from one side to the other. The X's on this wall section represent an area that will be melted away. A platform will be placed into this slot. The walls of this room will be made only of stone and metal. This is because the room will be incinerated by the fire traps, and any wooden panels on the wall would have been burned away. Here is the platform. It's made out of foam, but when finished it will look like it's made of metal. The insertion tab was made by simply melting away with a hot wire cutter the other sections. The metal on the walls will get a rust treatment, but the basic stonework will just use this one coat and one shade. And now a look at the finished room. So, thanks for watching. Not the biggest build of the project, but possibly one of the most threatening rooms. So please join me next week for the final build of this project.